Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Lewis, editor of Building Enclosure. Thanks for sitting along with us today. Global technology and consulting firm Infosys worked together with Browning Day to design a 70-acre site on the west side of Indianapolis, which is now home to their U.S. Education Center. The property, planned as an interconnected campus, features a training facility, residential center, and office buildings. One of the project's unique goals is to build the training center to one of the highest standards in sustainable design, Platinum certification under the LEED rating system. Daniel Overby, LEED Fellow and Browning Day's Director of Sustainability, is here to talk with us today. Dan, thanks for sitting with us today.
Lindsay, it's good to be here as always. Thank you for the invite back to talk.
So tell us about this project. How did it come to be? What can you tell us about it?
Well, this project, it's the first of a number of projects that's going to be on the site of the former Indianapolis International Airport. And so this campus by Infosys, which is a large tech company based out of India, they're establishing this campus in Indianapolis, and they announced it back in, I believe it was around 2017. But then in 2019, the project team and the owner, they're preparing to build this first major facility on this campus, and they announced that they wanted this first build to be a showcase for the city of Indianapolis and a pipeline for top tech talent. It was going to be a facility that's going to be used for education and training purposes of staff. And they wanted it to be emblematic of their corporate values and set a high watermark for sustainability. And they already came to the table, Infosys, with an international standard for LEED Platinum. And they approached us about doing LEED Platinum for this project in Indianapolis. The only problem was there's hardly any LEED Platinum projects in Indianapolis, and the ones that we have are relatively small. There's a 20,000 square foot Nature Conservancy headquarters in Indianapolis that was LEED Platinum back in 2010. More recently, another AEC related firm, they worked on their headquarters. It was about 14,000 square feet. And here, this project is over 160,000 square feet, corporate office facility. And so we knew it was going to be a big challenge. And I would say that the secret sauce in all of it was Infosys and their unwavering commitment to high performance and sustainability, and that under the constraints of schedule and budget and all those challenges that we face on every project, they stuck to LEED Platinum. They wanted it to get there, and that support was huge, and that was the wind to the sail that pushed us through.
So like you mentioned, the project meets one of the highest standards in sustainable design. So can you tell us more about those specific aspects of it?
Definitely. And so that was, I think, one of the clear objectives from sustainable design on the project was to achieve LEED Platinum. Along the way, lots of other value sets related to health and wellness and sustainability and environmental stewardship, but Infosys wanted to use LEED as a framework to have a holistic approach to sustainability. And that deep commitment to it, that unwavering commitment to the highest tier that you can achieve in that rating system is what helped us get there. We pursued credits. Let's see, we went for the site's credit for economically disadvantaged community location on the west side of Indianapolis. It was part of a bus rapid transit, that system that Indianapolis is establishing. That there's the Blue Line now that's in the works, working from the downtown of Indianapolis through a major transit hub all the way to the current international airport. Infosys worked with the city to actually establish a stop on the Blue Line. So it will be a hub where folks on the west side there in Indianapolis can get to this location, get on the BRT on the Blue Line, and get easily to downtown, the city's transit hub, and the airport. See other metrics, water use reduction, we were over 40% there. I think we'll talk about energy in a bit, I'm anticipating, and we were over 60% there. As you fly into Indianapolis and you see this facility at the adjacent old airport site, you'll see the abundant amount of photovoltaics. We can talk about that too. And those are just a few of the strategies and pursuits on this project.
So what was the client's drive to have the LEED Platinum? What were some requirements from them?
Well, the project located on that former airport site. Airports are usually not right smack in the middle of the city. They're usually on the outskirts where you can land planes and have plenty of space. So LEED really is designed to promote walkable communities, dense urban environments. And this was located basically in more of a lighter urban, maybe some might even call it somewhat suburban location. And this was meant to be a catalyst to tap into an anticipated bike network. And I mentioned the bus rapid transit and help just develop a commerce hub over there on the west side. And that was a major driver to rehabilitate this underutilized site that was the former airport location. It was this whole, I would say, broader idea of renewal at that location. And that was tricky insofar as working that in tandem with LEED because, well, instead of having 110 points available and, hey, Dan and team, figure out a way to get us to 80 or more points for platinum and you have 110 to work with. We never did have a full LEED deck because of these challenges with the location. So it was really a matter of, can we find a way to get 80 or more out of, let's say, around 85 points, if I recall correctly. So it wasn't a matter of what are you going to do from a LEED standpoint. It was, what are you not going to do? Because everything else on the table, you have to go after full force and you can't really mess up. So that was the major challenge on it, but and also gives you a glimpse of some of the great things that we pursued with that project.
So a project of this size has to have some challenges. What, maybe in your own opinion, what were some of the most challenging parts of it?
Well, one of the first things that comes to mind, in addition to the location related challenges I mentioned, it was an opportunity and a challenge. I had never before on a LEED project had the opportunity to bring in a specific entity for daylight. By the way, if you give me a chance to thank the team, I've got a whole list of contributors on this project. Because I haven't really named a lot of folks yet, but we had a daylighting specialist. We had an acoustic performance specialist on board. We had not just your mechanical commissioning authority, but we had a building enclosure specialist on board as well. And there was just a deep roster of role players that helped us pursue this, because one of the major challenges was just optimizing this project, that we were looking at ways of taking the enclosure, taking the mechanical systems, looking at energy in tandem with daylighting and the acoustics and thermal considerations, and giving folks adequate controls and being able to do all of this. There's always that balance, that give and take, the optimization. And that was one of the major challenges was, you know, the whole approach to sustainability has shifted over the years. It's gotten more sophisticated. It used to be about single attributes in material specifications. It had very rudimentary metrics related to energy or water or procurement. And now we're looking at things in a much more integrated manner, looking at optimizing solutions. And so just the evolution of the discourse in sustainability and the LEED rating system and increased expectations by ourselves, by our clients, it's prompting us to do more and do it better. And when you don't have any wiggle room on a project that's pursuing platinum like this one, it was really trying to do everything you possibly could and try to reduce the likelihood that something was going to slip through the cracks. So that all in all was probably the biggest challenge.
So maybe this question will be the same as the previous one. Maybe the most challenging parts were the most interesting parts for you, but I read a little bit about how construction waste was handled for this project, and even some of the very specific planting choices that were decided for this project. Can you maybe talk more on some of the more interesting things that you thought were pretty cool for this project?
Absolutely. So I mentioned a few minutes ago about this being the first in a number of structures on this corporate campus. And we approached this project as the first piece in this broader campus. There was a comprehensive site development looking at where we could, establishing indigenous flora, looking at native species, doing that from a stormwater standpoint, looking at that from just trying to increase biodiversity, looking at where we could try to reestablish the natural hydrology of the site. It had been previously developed, but stormwater is a big deal in Indianapolis, as it is with a lot of older cities in the country that have overtaxed infrastructure that oftentimes combines stormwater with sewage. And when that backs up, it becomes a big deal. And there's some things happening at the infrastructure level with Indianapolis, but we're also looking at what things we can do on our end and what the client desire to do in terms of site development. And so by pursuing all those things, including even materials that are more regional, not only does this project take on a local character, but it starts to just through, you mentioned the site, restoring ecosystem services and some of the other attributes that you get from a performance standpoint, all in all, helped, I think, get the entire campus development off to a good start. I will build off that a little bit to mention that one of the big lessons learned was that if anyone's wondering if the low emitting materials credit in LEED, for instance, going through all those checks of watching your emissions, looking at everything from your adhesives and your carpet tile and your just everything that you can think of on a project from a material standpoint. You're trying to go through all these categories, even the furniture when you can. And then you're looking at ways of managing your construction, indoor air quality. And if you're ever wondering if all of that really matters, we found out that it really does, because we got to the point late in the project where we realized we needed to maybe pursue a couple more points. And so we had never planned on doing air testing, but we decided to go ahead and pursue that at the end. We had done everything we could from the IQ standpoint, but this is one of those times where you're going beyond designing and specifying with good intentions toward really putting your money where your mouth is. And I would say everybody on the project team was a little bit nervous about how it was going to turn out. And we did everything we could, but air testing doesn't care what's in your project team's contracted scope. It doesn't care what the material emissions evaluation says. It doesn't care about any of that. All it cares about is what is the actual quality of the air. So we went and performed air testing, and we all had a collective sigh of relief. It passed with flying colors. And that was the result of just pursuing all of those IQ related credits in LEED. So I know many project teams won't be in a position to pursue air testing, but always pursue those IQ credits. And I'm just here to give that testimony that all those little things do add up to make a difference.
So not to segue onto a different topic, but maybe for some of our listeners that aren't familiar with air testing, can you kind of explain what goes into that process?
I can. So that if you're thinking about doing this on a project, you'll need to hire a specialist who has the knowledge and the equipment to come in. They will go through, they'll essentially look at your project. They'll look at key locations where they need to take actual air samples, and they will give you laboratory results on what is in the air, and they'll be looking at whether or not your air is essentially free of various compounds and particulate matter, et cetera. And LEED has a defined set of criteria that it's looking for. The person doing the air testing may have other criteria that they can test for that goes beyond what LEED may have. It's worth having that conversation. But when you do that, it's going to look at, see, how do I want to explain this? When you buy a new vehicle, and you get in the car and you get that new car smell, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of volatile organic compounds and such. I know a lot of your listeners saying, "Oh, Dan, they're odorless. They don't have odors." Okay, that's fine. I know a lot of them you can't detect, but making the point that when we're kind of conditioned to associate the new car smell or even the new building smell with clean and new, and this thing just opened and but we've heard all these testimonies, right, of folks that are in new buildings and they start to not feel good because what's happening, those materials are off gassing. Whenever you smell anything, you're breathing in small bits of whatever that is that you're smelling. And yes, some of them you can't detect, but indicative that there is stuff in the air. And so when you first install your materials, it's going to do that. By trying to specify and procure materials that do less of that, it will hopefully, and then you have to go through processes during construction, certain procedures to try to limit the amount of dust and particulate matter that may be maintained in the airstream and maybe even get into your mechanical systems and get distributed throughout your building. You just want to try to keep all of that to a minimum. So what the air testing does is it's looking at those compounds, it's looking at the particulate matter, and it's going to give you that result. And it's going to give you a report, and it's going to tell you what is in the air and how much of it's in the air. And then if the air is clean enough, you can send that in and get a LEED credit for it. But I would say on any project, regardless of the LEED criteria, you can still get that and see what the results are and understand what you're dealing with.
Very cool. So back to the project you were talking about, I love that Indiana Limestone is integrated in the structure. Can you talk a little bit on that? Is it just on like an aesthetic level, or is it like actually part of like the functioning structure?
It is mostly used in a cladding sense, and this is similar to what we were talking about with the site development, that you're really trying to make this thing rooted in its location, be an expression of the locale, draw off of local materials. And that's the limestone's another example of that it's responsive and grounded in the local environment. And it's something that we integrated into the structure, and it's inert, it's local, it's got a warmth to it, and we love it. We use it a lot. A lot of our corporate and institutional clients will use it a lot. And it's actually something that I'm proud to say Indiana is known for, regionally, nationally, sometimes even internationally. Is we got some quarries, and folks all over the nation and the world will tap Indiana for its beautiful limestone. And there's just something warm and enjoyable about it. And so yeah, it's about just kind of letting it be rooted in Indiana.
Very cool. So you gave your amazing acoustic team a shout out already. So let's go back to them. Let's talk about the thermal and acoustic comfort levels that you met. How did this project go about achieving that?
So we talked internally about going after all of the so-called comforts. And I think on a building project, we talk about thermal comfort a lot, because Lindsay, if we were talking live in front of a audience, and because I do this with my students, if I were to say, hey, raise your hand if you're hot right now, raise your hand if you're cold right now, raise your hand if you're just right, you're going to have a hot next to a just right next to a warm. It's so much of comfort is, I mean, there are real factors, physical factors involved with it, but a lot of it also is psychological. Comfort is an opinion, and we pursued thermal, we pursued lighting and acoustic comfort, the three comforts, and recognize that all of those are part of what makes a space enjoyable for occupants. And so we went through the LEED V4 credit framework for thermal and for lighting, and there's kind of a criteria-based aspect to it, and then there's a controls-based aspect to it, and we pursued it on both of those. On the acoustics, I am really excited by the new LEED V4.1 acoustic performance credit. If anyone has felt like the older V4 version of that credit was too much of a challenge, I don't know of any project team that was able to achieve the old version 4 acoustic performance credit, but we actually went after the 4.1 version of it, and we were able to get awarded on HVAC background noise, sound transmission, and reverberation time. And so those are just 3 different aspects of what contributes to acoustic comfort. One being you're in this project, there's a lot of open office area. And we wanted to make sure that we had a HVAC background noise system in place to just help with privacy and comfort from an acoustic standpoint there, but then also the sound transmission. This thing is, after all, located next to the current international airport. So the sound that comes in from outside became especially important and a challenge that the team carefully worked through. But then also the reverberation time. It's some materials will bounce sound, some will absorb sound, and how you work them all together and geometrically how your space is designed, it's going to result in how loud or quiet your space may be. And we pursued all 3 of those aspects insofar as the LEED criteria was involved, but that did require us to hire an acoustician and help us optimize for that, just like we had to do with our daylighting solution as well. That also entailed a special effort where we were very judicious with the windows and their sizing and the glazing. There's several different types of glazing that we used, external shading devices and some internal controls. And what we did from an interior standpoint with finishes was all done with just this fine-tuned approach to trying to help with our spatial daylight autonomy and address glare as much as we could, and also not allow there to be any more of a energy loss through the aggregate effect of all the glazing we had than what was necessary. So just kind of balancing all those things. The entire building is a balancing act in optimized performance.
So what was so hard about the last V4 criteria? What compared to the 4.1? You said, what was so hard? Why was it so hard to achieve?
Well, they recognized that acoustics needs to be part of the discussion. It got carried over from another version of the rating system and got brought into the more commonly used BD&C, the new construction rating system. And as it was designed under version 4, it was a very robust all or nothing approach, whereas the V4.1 made it more accessible by breaking down the credit a bit more, giving more pathways for project teams to pursue these mixes of strategies based on what's most beneficial to the project team. And I would say it was the same story actually with the daylighting. We went with the version 4.1 daylighting credit as well. USGBC has worked hard to make some of those more challenging credits more accessible and have more pathways to achievement by project teams. And so I would say for anyone who's maybe soured on acoustic performance or the daylighting performance credits from past LEED projects, try out those version 4.1 credits, because we had that experience on both and we pursued the V4.1 version of both credits and we achieved both. I would say actually, Lindsay, I hadn't even put it together until just now with you asking me this. I would say platinum was made possible because of version 4.1, because it created that accessibility to some of the credits and meeting the intent of those credits. And I would just say that work that was put into making some of those credits better and more achievable, having better pathways, that probably made I'm just totally spitballing here, but probably like a 5-point difference, which in our case was a difference in certification level.
That's so interesting. Well, I'm glad I asked. I could help you put that together. So you read my mind earlier. You knew I was going to ask about it. Let's talk about energy costs. How did you go about reducing energy costs?
So in addition to optimizing the enclosure we talked about, trying to make it also as tight as we could possibly make it through some of our detailing, that was another important aspect. Commissioning was really vital as well. There's a great stat I heard, I think it was from a Lawrence Berkeley white paper. I know Peter Rumsey, who was involved with this project too, mentioned in a publication several years ago that 90% of commercial structures have some kind of mechanical problem in the first year of operation. It could be something wasn't programmed right. It could be a damper got stuck, but 9 out of 10 are going to have some kind of issue. So if that's not a case for commissioning, I don't know what is. Add to that, we added the building enclosure commissioning, which is something you and I've talked about. And I would say for anyone dig into building enclosure magazine, because there's been lots of stuff published about building enclosure commissioning, but we use that on this project to make sure that, again, the owner gets what they think they're paying for in terms of just an energy efficient, tight building envelope. And we went through and did all the performance testing for that and worked forward with greater confidence that we had this tight, efficient enclosure, fine-tuned mechanical systems, optimized for daylight, so you don't have to use any more lighting energy than you need to. In aggregate, we were able to have, I believe it was over 60% energy cost savings. And the last piece to all of this was the on-site photovoltaic array that anyone landing at the Indianapolis airport will see, because this is right next to the airport. It's that solar panel array was a significant piece to all of this as well. I believe we saved about $75,000 per year based on our modeled energy consumption from this. So it was, I want to say, if I recall correctly, it was 350 MWH PV system. So it was a good size. I mean, it covers most of the roof space that we had available to it. If I'm recalling, it was over 50% of the that additional energy cost was offset by the PV that we had there. So it was a significant contributor.
So what stage is the project currently in?
It is finished, it's certified, and I would say if anyone visits Indianapolis, you might look at a way of, we went through an education program there. My understanding is if there's, you make contact, that you get an opportunity to pay a visit and check out the process. So it's, but it's up and operational, and I want to say that it achieved all those goals that the owner set out to have, and it's that high watermark for sustainability in Indianapolis, and it carries through that corporate commitment to sustainability, that international commitment. And despite the challenges we have within the region, that unwavering commitment to it helped us achieve it.
So speaking of that, what can other design firms take away from this project? I know we're kind of, the project owners say what they want for the project, but how do we kind of steer people into going for sustainable projects like this?
I found that time and time again, standards matter. And this won't catch you as a surprise, because on the BE blog, this is a recurring topic in some of the pieces that I contribute to it, that my own experience has been, when you have an abstract goal of, I want to do sustainability on a project, that puts you in a position to do some good things, have some good intentions. But when you stick to minimum standards, codes, rating systems, something like LEED that's going to go far beyond what a code minimum would have and push the market forward, that setting clear goals and then committing to these frameworks and these standards and these rating systems, that will matter. That will put your architect, your engineer, your contractor in a position to leverage those defined standards to create a conversation and create decision-making discussions that otherwise might not occur under the pressure of schedule, budget, et cetera, all those other resource capitals that we all work through on every project. So I think that that's the biggest takeaway is, here's a large international corporation says, this is our standard. We're having an unwavering commitment to this defined standard and framework. And that helped us as AEC professionals to step in and move constructively toward a very clear outcome. And that's my biggest takeaway is that those standards do matter. And that's, I think, the key to success is clear goals, even during the OPR stage. So if anyone listening, if you're an owner, set those clear goals for sustainable design in your OPR when that goes to project teams, that they know from the jump there is this unwavering commitment to a defined standard, whether it's LEED or otherwise, and that commitment is what's going to carry that goal through the entire project.
All right, Dan, do you want to shout out any of the teams you worked with?
Definitely. This project, achieving LEED Platinum, would simply not have been possible without the contributions of the amazing AEC professional group that I had the opportunity to work with on this. Point Energy Innovations with Peter Rumsey and his team, working with Infosys. I've mentioned Infosys and their unwavering commitment to LEED Platinum. That all mattered tremendously. The amazing team at Browning Day, Ross and Berrezzini on the MEP side, Fink, Roberts, and Petrie on structural, looking at the construction management, Browning Investments, the lead manager that Browning had on board as well, Brittany Storm with Bravo MCC, was absolutely stellar. On the civil engineering side, Cripe Architects and Engineers, the commissioning authority I had mentioned, HEPE Engineering. On the building enclosure side, TSI, and then the daylighting designer, Lamb Partners, helped us optimize that enclosure, and the acoustician was IMEG. It really took every little point, every little bit, every sleepless night any of those team members had, Lindsay, it came through in the end. So I just could not thank enough any of them and others. There were others involved too. And I apologize if I am forgetting anybody in particular, but definitely had to give a quick shout to that list there.
Well, thank you again, Dan, for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Lindsay, you're always welcome. And step back in anytime.
If anyone listening has any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Dan, and we'd love to continue the conversation. Until next time, visit us on buildingclosureonline.com for all your technical and educational resources.